Story 1. That morning, when I opened my door, something felt off. There, taped to the wood like an afterthought, was a note. It stood out against the usual sea of coupons and rent reminders, handwritten in frantic, jagged strokes, as if scrawled in desperation. "We need to talk about last night." My breath hitched. My fingers tightened around the paper as I tried so hard, to recall anything from the night before. But my memory was blank, eerily vacant. I hadn't spoken to my neighbor. Hadn't even thought about them. And certainly hadn't done anything that would warrant such an ominous message. A chill crawled along my spine. Maybe it was a mistake, meant for someone else. But the more I stared at it, the more certain I became that this wasn't an accident. This was for me. I forced myself to think back. The previous night had been uneventful, or so I thought. I stayed in, watched some TV, and went to bed early. No visitors. No disturbances. Nothing that should have left me waking up to a note that pulsed with a silent warning. The words echoed in my mind. "We need to talk." Before I could second-guess myself, I crossed the hall to my neighbor's door. I knocked 3 times. Each tap of my knuckles sounded unnaturally loud in the hush of the corridor. I waited. Silence. I knocked again, harder. Nothing. Their car was outside. They had to be home. But no shuffling footsteps, no hesitant creak of the door. Just quiet. Too quiet. I lingered, debating whether to leave the note at their door, but an unease had taken root in my chest. The kind that made the air feel heavier, like something unseen was pressing down on me. As if the very walls of the building were listening. Eventually, I returned to my apartment, telling myself I'd try again later. But as the hours passed, the note burrowed into my thoughts, refusing to be ignored. My mind twisted with questions. Had I forgotten something? Had I done something in my sleep? That evening, as I stirred dinner on the stove, a sound sent ice lancing through my veins. A knock. Soft, hesitant. But unmistakable. I spun toward the door, pulse hammering. Finally. My neighbor had come to explain. I yanked it open. No one. The hallway stretched before me, empty and still. My skin prickled as I stepped outside, scanning up and down the corridor. No footsteps, no movement. Just the echo of my own breath in the suffocating stillness. Swallowing hard, I retreated inside, double-checking the locks. The silence that followed was heavier than before, wrapping around the apartment like an invisible presence. The next morning, another note waited for me. Same placement. Same frantic handwriting. "You shouldn't have ignored me. It's too late now." Dread pooled in my stomach, cold and unshakable. My fingers trembled as I clutched the note. Too late for what? I hadn't ignored anyone. I hadn't spoken to anyone in days. And yet, something inside me whispered that I had made a mistake, a terrible, irreversible mistake. I called the building manager. No answer. I left a message, asking about my neighbor. Hours passed, my nerves stretched thin. When they finally called back, their words sent a fresh wave of unease crawling through me. My neighbor hadn't paid rent in 2 months. Their lease was up. And no one, had seen them in weeks. The apartment? Locked. From the inside. The manager had tried contacting them multiple times, but there was no response. And now, staring at the note still clutched in my hands, my breath came shallow and fast. Had the messages been a desperate cry for help? Or a warning? That night, I barely slept. The weight of something unseen pressed against the walls of my apartment. At 3 a.m., just as exhaustion was beginning to claim me, I heard it again. A knock. Light. Persistent. I held my breath, staring at the ceiling, afraid to move. My fingers clenched the blanket, knuckles white. Then, a whisper. Faint. Right outside my door. I shouldn't have ignored them. The next morning, my neighbor's apartment remained empty. The hallway, quieter than ever. The notes stopped coming. But every time I hear a knock at my door, my heart still stutters in my chest. Because I can't help but wonder. Is it them? Or something else entirely? Story 2. I woke up groggy, the pale light of morning bleeding through the curtains, casting long, ghostly shadows across my room. My body ached from a restless night, my mind still tangled in the remnants of uneasy dreams. With a sigh, I reached for my phone on the nightstand, my fingers brushing against its cold, familiar surface. As I unlocked it, expecting the usual flood of notifications, an unsettling silence greeted me. Something was wrong. My brows furrowed as I stared at the screen. No messages. No missed calls. Not a single alert. A strange emptiness settled in my stomach. I swiped to my contacts, convinced there had to be some mistake, but what I found sent a chill crawling up my spine. The list was empty. Every name, every number, gone. My family, my friends, my coworkers. It was as if they had never existed. My breath hitched, my fingers trembling as I scrolled in desperation. This had to be a glitch. A corrupted file. Something logical, something explainable. But then, at the very bottom of the list, a single name remained. A name I didn't recognize. No notes. No details. Just a first and last name, stark and unfamiliar. My heartbeat pounded in my ears as I tapped on it, my stomach twisting with unease. The phone number attached was just as foreign, an untraceable sequence of digits, devoid of meaning, yet radiating something wrong. A thick, oppressive weight pressed against my chest. Who was this? Why was this the only contact left in my phone? My rational mind screamed at me to ignore it, to reset my device, to pretend I never saw it. But curiosity gnawed at me, an insidious whisper that refused to be silenced. Against my better judgment, I tapped the call button. The line rang. And rang. And rang. Each tone stretched unbearably long, like something lurking in the darkness, watching, waiting. Then, with a click, someone answered. A voice, cold and mechanical, whispered through the speaker. Why did you call me? The room around me felt suddenly smaller, the air too thick to breathe. The voice was devoid of inflection, emotionless, hollow, like the echo of something that had forgotten how to be human. My throat tightened. I don't know who you are, I managed to stammer, the words barely above a whisper. A silence followed. A silence that stretched, twisted, crept into the corners of the room and settled into my bones. I felt the weight of it pressing down, a presence on the other end of the line that wasn't just listening, it was studying. Then the voice returned, colder than before. You shouldn't have called me. The line went dead. I sat there, the phone still pressed to my ear, my pulse hammering in my skull. My skin prickled with the unnatural weight of the moment. Slowly, I pulled the phone away and checked the call log. Nothing. No record of the call. No trace of the number. As if it had never happened at all. Panic clawed at my chest. I checked my settings, my cloud backups, anything that might explain why my contacts had disappeared. Nothing. It was as though they had been erased, wiped clean from my life, leaving only that single, ominous name behind. As the hours passed, unease curled inside me like a parasite. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone, that I was being watched, scrutinized by something just beyond my comprehension. Then, as night settled, my phone vibrated on the coffee table. A message. From the unknown contact. I hesitated, my stomach twisting as I picked up the phone. The message was simple, yet it hollowed me out from the inside. I'm still here. The blood drained from my face. My fingers trembled as I hovered over the keyboard, debating whether to respond. But what would I even say? What if answering was exactly what it wanted? My gut screamed at me to ignore it, to shut the phone off and pretend none of this was happening. Instead, I deleted the message. But the fear didn't leave me. It festered, a silent whisper in the back of my mind. That night, every creak of the house, every shifting shadow sent a jolt of terror through me. I double-checked my locks. Closed my curtains. Yet I still felt its presence, lingering just beyond reach. Then, a few nights later, as I was mindlessly scrolling through my phone, I saw it again. The contact had changed. It wasn't just a name anymore. A message had been added beneath it. "I'm closer than you think." A cold dread wrapped around my spine like a vice. My breath came in short, shallow gasps as I stared at the words, my reflection in the screen looking just as terrified as I felt. The message didn't make sense. How could they know where I was? How could they be near me? I turned off my phone and flung it across the room, my hands shaking uncontrollably. But even as the device lay dark and silent on the floor, I knew deep in my gut, this wasn't over. It had already found its way in. And it wasn't going to let me go. Story 3. It was a Wednesday afternoon when I first saw it. The sun hung low in the sky, draping the neighborhood in a soft, golden haze. The air was thick with the scent of autumn, crisp leaves, distant chimney smoke, the faint whisper of something decaying just beneath the surface. I had just returned from work, the usual exhaustion weighing heavy on my shoulders, when my fingers fumbled for my keys at the front door. That's when I noticed it. Something odd jutted out of my mailbox, something that didn't belong. Not a letter, not a package. It was an envelope. Plain. Unmarked. No stamp, no return address, no indication of where it had come from. A whisper of unease coiled around my spine as I pulled it free. At first, I expected it to be another one of those throwaway advertisements that accumulated like ghosts in my mailbox. But the moment I held it, something shifted. The air seemed heavier. The world, a little quieter. With careful fingers, I peeled it open. Inside was a map. At first glance, it was familiar. It was my neighborhood, the streets and intersections I knew by heart. The grocery store I passed daily, the small park where children laughed on summer afternoons. But something was off. The lines weren't printed, they were drawn by hand, inked with careful precision, yet uneven in places, darker in some spots, fainter in others, as though the artist's hand had trembled. And there, cutting through the streets in bold red, was a path. A route leading away from my home to a place I didn't recognize. I stared at it for what felt like an eternity, my mind weaving questions faster than I could grasp them. Who had left this? And why? Was it a mistake? A prank? Some bizarre scavenger hunt? I glanced around, half expecting to see someone watching me, a shadow shifting behind a tree, a face disappearing from a window. But there was nothing. Just the quiet hum of an ordinary evening. I stepped inside, closing the door with a soft click. The envelope sat on my table, an unspoken challenge. I knew I should throw it away, forget it ever existed. But the more I looked at it, the stranger it became. The marked path twisted toward the outskirts of town, a place I rarely ventured. No landmarks, no obvious destination. Just a silent invitation. That night, sleep evaded me. The map lingered in the back of my mind, whispering its mystery. By the time I finished dinner, my resolve had crumbled. I found myself at the table again, tracing the route with my finger. An almost imperceptible pull guided me forward. Against all logic, I knew I had to follow it. By the time I left my house, the sun had long since disappeared, leaving only the dim glow of flickering streetlights to guide my way. My neighborhood, so familiar in daylight, now stretched before me in eerie silence. The usual sounds of barking dogs and passing cars seemed muted, distant. I walked slowly, my heartbeat steady but alert. As I neared the point where the map veered into the unknown, the streets changed. The houses grew farther apart, their lawns overgrown, their windows dark. The air smelled different here, damp earth and something else, something old and rotting. The streetlights became infrequent, casting long, distorted shadows that made everything feel just a little more wrong. And then, the alley appeared. A narrow, yawning mouth of darkness, wedged between two crumbling buildings. The map led me straight into it. I hesitated, my breath hitching. Logic screamed at me to turn back, to run home, to lock my doors and pretend none of this had happened. But my feet betrayed me. One step, then another. The alley swallowed me whole. The silence was unbearable. My footsteps echoed off the walls, each one amplifying the unease that clawed at my chest. I felt it before I saw it, the sensation of being watched. The cold prickle of unseen eyes dragging over my skin. But when I glanced back, there was no one. Just the suffocating darkness stretching endlessly behind me. At the end of the alley, the road opened into a desolate lot. Buildings loomed on either side, abandoned and forgotten, their windows shattered like jagged teeth. And in the center of that empty space sat a single object. A wooden box. It was small, weathered, aged by time and elements. There were no markings, no indication of what it contained. And yet, I knew, this was what I had come for. My breath shuddered as I stepped closer. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to leave it alone, to turn back while I still could. But I couldn't. I knelt down, fingers brushing against the rough wood. The moment I touched it, a wave of cold dread rolled through me. My stomach clenched. The air thickened. I hesitated, but my curiosity, my need to understand, was stronger than my fear. With trembling hands, I lifted the lid. Inside, there were photographs. Old, yellowed with age. Some edges curled, others torn, as though they had been handled many times before. My fingers trembled as I picked up the first one. It was me. Walking to work. Another, sitting in my backyard. A third, standing at the grocery store, my back turned, unaware of the lens that had captured me. Each photo, taken at different times, different places. Some from weeks ago. Others, months. Someone had been watching me. My breath hitched, my pulse thundering. Beneath the stack of photos lay a single piece of paper. A note, folded neatly. My hands shook as I opened it, my eyes struggling to adjust to the jagged, uneven handwriting. You were never meant to find this. The words sent a violent shiver through me. My chest constricted. The world tilted. I slammed the box shut and bolted. My feet pounded against the pavement, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't stop running, not until I was back in my car, doors locked, engine roaring to life. When I finally reached home, I secured every lock, every window, every possible way in. The map still sat in my pocket, but I couldn't bring myself to look at it. That night, sleep never came. The images burned into my mind, the photographs, the note, the box waiting in that empty lot. It had been a warning. But from whom? And why? One thing was certain. This wasn't over. It had only just begun. Story 4. I woke up with a strange sense of disorientation, my mind swimming in the murky space between dreams and wakefulness. My body felt heavy, sluggish, as if I had spent the entire night moving rather than resting. With a groggy sigh, I reached for my phone, hoping to check the time, perhaps reassure myself that I had gotten enough sleep. But as the screen lit up, a notification from my fitness tracker caught my eye. Great run. 3.2 miles completed at 2:13 a.m. My breath hitched in my throat. My pulse quickened. A cold, creeping sensation spread through me as I reread the words, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. I hadn't gone for a run. I hadn't even left my house. The last thing I remembered was settling onto the couch, the glow of the television flickering in the dimly lit living room. A movie, a warm blanket, the slow descent into sleep. But a run? No. That was impossible. With trembling fingers, I opened the fitness app to check the details. Maybe it was a glitch, some random bug in the system. Maybe the tracker had recorded a phantom workout. But as I examined the data, dread settled deep in my chest. It wasn't a mistake. The run was logged with precise accuracy, distance, pace, even a mapped route. My usual route. The path I took whenever I went for a jog around the neighborhood. I knew every turn, every stretch of pavement. And the strangest part? The recorded pace was faster than anything I had ever managed before. My stomach twisted. Was I sleepwalking? No, sleep running. The idea seemed absurd, yet what other explanation was there? I had heard of people doing strange things in their sleep, but this was something else entirely. I needed proof. I needed to know if this was real. Heart pounding, I stumbled toward the entryway where I always left my running shoes. If I had truly gone outside, there would be signs, dirt on the soles, misplaced laces, something. But there they were, neatly placed by the door, untouched. Pristine. Just as I had left them. A chill crawled up my spine. Something wasn't right. Determined to find answers, I opened the security camera app on my phone. I had cameras installed outside for peace of mind, motion activated, high resolution. If I had gone for a run, there would be footage. Proof, one way or another. I scrolled through the recordings, my fingers cold against the screen. Then, at exactly 2:13 a.m., the footage captured movement. A figure. Running. My breath caught in my throat. The figure moved swiftly down the street, disappearing into the darkness. I squinted at the grainy image, trying to make out details, but what I saw made my skin prickle with horror. The person wasn't a stranger. It was me. Same running jacket. Same sneakers. Same rhythmic stride. The way my arms pumped, the way my feet hit the pavement, it was unmistakable. But it couldn't be. Because I was inside. Asleep. Wasn't I? Panic clawed at my chest. My head swam with possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. Could someone have hacked my fitness tracker? Was someone mimicking me, playing some elaborate, twisted prank? Or a more terrifying thought crept in. What if it really was me? What if I had been running, unknowingly, unwillingly, something else guiding my body through the empty streets? The next few nights passed uneventfully, though sleep didn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the weight of the mystery pressing down on me, as if something was lurking just beyond my understanding. Then, a week later, it happened again. This time, the notification arrived at 3:08 a.m. My blood ran cold. Dread pooled in my stomach as I checked the security footage, already bracing myself for what I might see. But this time, there was nothing. No movement. No figure. No proof of anyone leaving or entering my house. And yet, the run had been recorded. Had something changed? Had I adapted, hidden from my own cameras? Or was something else running in my place? The unease was suffocating. I felt watched, observed, as if something, someone, was waiting for me to unravel the truth. But no matter how hard I searched for answers, they remained just out of reach. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized this might not have been the first time. There had been other nights, other mornings where I woke with the strange, lingering feeling that I had been somewhere else. Doing something I couldn't quite remember. But what? And more terrifying still. What if it happens again? Story 5. It was a typical Tuesday evening when I finally made it home, exhausted from a long day at work. The weight of my grocery bags in one hand and a heavy bag of books in the other felt like anchors dragging me down. My mind buzzed with an endless list of tasks, bills to pay, emails to send, a dinner I barely had the energy to make. As I approached my front door, I reached into my pocket for my keys, expecting the familiar jingle. But instead, my fingers brushed against the smooth, empty fabric. My heart skipped a beat. My breath caught in my throat as I patted my other pockets, rummaged through my bag, checked again. Nothing. For a moment, I stood frozen, my pulse thudding in my ears. I always kept my key in my pocket or, on rare occasions, in my bag. But it was nowhere. A rush of anxiety coursed through me as I glanced down, scanning the ground on the off chance that it had fallen. And that's when I saw it. Just barely peeking out from beneath the doormat was the unmistakable glint of metal. My spare house key. I felt the blood drain from my face. My spare key. The one I kept locked away inside a small box on the top shelf of my closet. The key that had never left my house. A cold shiver crawled down my spine as I crouched down, fingers trembling, and pulled it free. The metal was cool, familiar, and entirely out of place. My breath came in short, uneven gasps as my mind scrambled for a rational explanation. Had I misplaced it? No. I would have never left it there. Someone had placed it under the mat. Someone had been inside my home. My stomach twisted with unease as I fumbled with the lock and pushed open the door. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The faint scent of my morning coffee still lingered in the air, and everything appeared untouched. The books on my coffee table were neatly stacked, the furniture exactly as I had left it. But the silence was suffocating. The kind of silence that makes the hairs on your arms stand on end, that makes you feel like you are not alone. I forced myself to move, heading straight to my bedroom, to the small wooden box where I always kept my spare key. I reached for it, hands unsteady. The lid was slightly ajar. I opened it, dreading what I already knew. The key was gone. The lock on the box was still intact, no signs of tampering, no damage. But the key was missing. And somehow, it had ended up outside, under my doormat. A deep, gnawing dread settled in my stomach as I checked the rest of the house. Closets, drawers, every possible hiding place. Nothing was missing, nothing was out of place. As if whoever had been here had only taken the key. That night, sleep was impossible. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind against the windows made my heart leap into my throat. I lay in bed, stiff as a corpse, ears straining against the silence, imagining shadows that weren't there. Had someone been watching me? Studying my habits, learning my routine? The thought sent an icy wave of terror through me. By morning, I had made up my mind. I called a locksmith, had the locks changed, and installed an extra layer of security. But no amount of precaution could shake the unease that had rooted itself deep in my bones. I told myself I was overreacting, that maybe I had simply forgotten to put the key away properly. Maybe I had been careless. Maybe. A week passed. Life moved on. Work, errands, dinner with friends. But the feeling never truly left. I found myself glancing at my front door more often, eyeing the doormat warily, checking the locks twice, 3 times before bed. Then, one evening, as I sat at my desk working on a project, I heard it. A rustling sound. Faint, almost imperceptible. Outside my window. I froze, my pulse hammering in my throat. I held my breath, listening. Nothing. Just the quiet hum of the night. Maybe it was the wind, I told myself. Maybe it was nothing. But the feeling of being watched returned, stronger than before. The following weekend, as I was heading out, I stopped dead in my tracks. The front door, which I had locked the night before, checked twice, was slightly ajar. My breath caught in my chest. A slow, creeping terror coiled around my ribs. I hesitated, every instinct screaming at me to turn around, to run, to call someone. But I stepped forward, pushed the door open. The house was exactly as I had left it. Everything in its place. No sign of forced entry. No broken locks. No missing belongings. But the door. The door had been opened. A cold chill ran down my spine as I stepped inside, shutting it behind me with a quiet click. My fingers trembled as I turned the lock, securing it once more. My heart pounded in my chest as I stood there, staring into the stillness, knowing that someone had been here. Someone had entered. Someone had left. And now, they were waiting. Watching. And I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Story 6. The night was quiet, the kind of silence that settles over the city when most people have gone to bed, leaving only the distant hum of traffic and the occasional sigh of the wind through the trees. I sat at my desk, hunched over my keyboard, the cold glow of the screen casting long shadows across my apartment. It was late, too late, but I had convinced myself that finishing just one more task was worth the exhaustion that would follow in the morning. The air was still. My fingers moved mechanically over the keys, my mind lost in the monotony of work, when, knock. A sharp, deliberate rap against the window. The sound shot through me like ice water down my spine. My fingers froze above the keyboard, my breath catching in my throat. My apartment was on the 3rd floor. I sat there, listening, my pulse hammering in my ears. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe it was just the wind or the building settling, some perfectly logical explanation. Knock. Louder this time. Closer. I swallowed hard, my head turning toward the window as dread slithered up my back. The blinds were partially drawn, leaving only a sliver of the glass exposed. My own reflection stared back at me, ghostly in the pale light of my screen. Beyond it, only darkness. I told myself not to get up. I told myself to ignore it. But my body moved before my mind could stop it, feet shuffling toward the window, heart pounding so hard I thought it might shake the floor beneath me. I peered out cautiously, pressing my face close to the glass. The street below was deserted. The streetlights cast their sickly yellow glow on the pavement, stretching shadows into grotesque shapes. There was no sign of movement. No figures lingering in the dark. Nothing. A shiver crept over my skin, but I forced a breath, exhaling my nerves away. Maybe it had been a bird. Or something shifting on the roof. Yeah, that had to be it. I shook my head, feeling ridiculous, and turned away. Then the knocking came again. But not from the window this time. From the door. I stopped, every muscle in my body locking into place. The air felt heavier now, thick with something unspoken. My apartment was small, and the door wasn't far. I could see it from where I stood. Knock. Knock. The sound was slow. Measured. I stared at the door, my mind scrambling for explanations, but none of them made sense. My building had a security system. You couldn't just walk in without being buzzed up. And yet, someone was there. Waiting. I hesitated, then, with a trembling hand, reached for my phone and dialed my friend. I needed to hear another voice, needed something to ground me. She picked up after a few rings, her voice groggy with sleep. Hey, everything okay? I hesitated. Saying it out loud felt ridiculous. I think someone's knocking on my door. And before that, it was my window. Silence. Then, what? I swallowed. It's probably nothing. Just my imagination, or... Knock. Louder. Harder. She heard it through the phone. What the hell was that? Her voice was sharper now, more alert. I didn't answer. My feet were carrying me toward the door, slow, reluctant steps. I reached it, pulse a deafening drumbeat in my skull. I didn't want to look. But I had to. I pressed my eye to the peephole. Nothing. The hallway outside was empty. The fluorescent light flickered weakly, casting dull shadows along the walls, but there was no one there. I let out a shaky breath. Maybe they had left. Maybe it really had been a prank or some lost drunk who picked the wrong apartment. Then my phone buzzed in my hand. A text. "Don't open the door." It was from an unknown number. My breath caught in my throat. The air in the apartment turned suffocating. My fingers trembled as I typed out a reply. "Who is this?" No response. The silence stretched, pressing down on me like a weight, and for the first time, I became painfully aware of how alone I was. Then, from the peephole, something moved. Not a person. Not a shadow. Something else. Something too tall, too thin. And it was still knocking. Story 7. I sat at my desk, frustration tightening around me like a noose. All I wanted was to make a simple online purchase, something I had done 1,000 times before. I entered my debit card details, clicked pay, and waited for the familiar confirmation screen. Instead, a jagged red error message flashed back at me. Declined. I frowned. That didn't make sense. I had checked my account just yesterday, and everything was fine. Maybe I mistyped something. Slowly, methodically, I re-entered my card details. Number. Expiration date. Security code. Everything was correct. I hit submit again. Declined. A prickling unease crept up my spine. Something was wrong. I grabbed my phone and opened my banking app, my pulse quickening as the screen loaded. The moment my balance appeared, my stomach dropped. It was lower than it should have been. Much lower. My breath hitched as I scrolled through my recent transactions. Most of them were familiar: groceries, bills, a subscription fee. Then my eyes locked onto something wrong. A purchase I didn't recognize. A place I had never been. The transaction had been made hours ago in a city I had never even stepped foot in. I stared at the screen, my mind struggling to piece together a rational explanation. I was home all day. I hadn't lost my card. It was right there, tucked safely in my wallet. Yet someone, somewhere, had used it. My hands trembled as I called my bank. The hold music droned in my ear, each second stretching unbearably. When the representative finally answered, I stumbled through an explanation, my words hurried, frantic. My card was declined, and there's a charge on my account. I didn't make it. I don't even know where this place is. She asked for my details, a pause stretching between us as she pulled up my account. Then, her voice returned, calm, factual. Yes, the transaction went through successfully. It was made at a physical store earlier today. I felt a chill crawl down my arms. A physical store? I whispered. Yes, at a location in, she named the city, and my skin prickled. It was halfway across the country. That's impossible, I breathed. I haven't left my house. My card hasn't left my wallet. She was silent for a moment, then offered to freeze my card while they investigated. I numbly agreed, but the unease had already rooted itself deep inside me. Someone had used my card. Someone had stolen from me. But how? I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, the transaction flashed before me, the amount, the timestamp, the name of a store in a city I had never visited. A terrifying thought slithered into my mind, one I couldn't shake. What if this wasn't random? The next day, I took every precaution. Changed all my passwords. Set up two-factor authentication. Ordered a new debit card. But no matter what I did, the dread wouldn't leave. And then, I received an email. It was from my bank. A security alert. A new login from an unfamiliar device. I froze. My throat went dry. Whoever had used my card, they had access to my account. I scrambled to log in, heart hammering as I checked for new transactions. Nothing. No new charges, no withdrawals. But the thought that someone, somewhere, had my information made my skin crawl. I changed my password again, locked down my accounts even tighter. But the feeling didn't go away. That evening, the phone rang. It was the bank. "We've traced the fraudulent purchase," the representative said, her voice clipped, professional. "But there's something strange." I gripped the phone tighter. "What?" "The charge wasn't online," she said. "It was made in person. At the store." My blood ran cold. "In person?" I echoed, barely recognizing my own voice. "That's not possible. I have my card." "Yes," she said carefully. "But the payment was made using your card details, as if the card was physically present." My breath turned shallow. The room around me blurred. "How?" I whispered. "How is that even possible?" She hesitated. "It's unclear. But, the investigation is still ongoing." I felt like I was slipping into some kind of nightmare, a reality that didn't make sense. But it wasn't over. A few days passed, and I tried to go back to normal. Tried to convince myself it was just some thief, some scammer. And then, the final blow. Another alert from my bank. A new transaction. I felt my stomach twist as I opened the app. Another purchase. A much larger amount. Same city. Different store. Whoever was doing this was getting bolder. And worse, they weren't stopping. Panic gripped me as I spent the night on the phone with my bank, with the police. I repeated the same words over and over. I didn't make this purchase. I wasn't there. I don't know how this is happening. But no one had answers. No one could tell me how my card had been used, physically used, when it had never left my possession. No one could explain how they had gotten access to my account. All they could say was that the investigation would continue. Days passed. The fraudulent transactions stopped. But the fear didn't. Because someone out there had found a way inside my life. And as I sat alone in my room that night, staring at the glow of my phone screen, I couldn't shake the feeling. They were still watching. Story 8. It was just another ordinary evening. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky bruised with fading light as the city slowly exhaled into silence. The streets were emptying, and the hum of traffic had faded into a dull murmur in the distance. I walked alone, my breath visible in the crisp night air, my footsteps echoing softly against the pavement. I passed by a row of dimly lit store windows, their glass panes reflecting the sleepy world around them. One caught my attention, a boutique, its display modest, just a few scattered items barely illuminated by the glow of a flickering streetlight. I glanced at my reflection, a habit I had when walking past windows, just a quick check to adjust my coat, to confirm I was still me. But then, something stopped me cold. My reflection moved. Not in the natural way reflections should. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't a trick of the light. It moved deliberately. It raised its hand. And it waved at me. I hadn't lifted mine. My breath hitched, my body locked in place as I stared. The wave wasn't frantic or playful, it was slow, measured, almost patient. It wasn't mirroring me. It was acting on its own. A chill crawled up my spine. I turned sharply, scanning the street, looking for someone, anyone, who might be playing a trick on me. But the street was empty. It was just me. And it. The reflection kept waving, its hand moving in that same eerily steady rhythm. Not demanding my attention, not asking for acknowledgement, just moving. Moving like it had a mind of its own. I swallowed hard. My pulse hammered against my ribs. Slowly, hesitantly, I stepped closer, my breath fogging up the glass as I peered in, searching for an explanation. A trick of the light? Fatigue? My mind playing games with me? I lifted my hand, testing it, trying to see if the reflection would finally sync with me. It didn't. The wave never stopped. And then, worse, the reflection smiled. Not a normal, natural smile. Not my smile. Something inside me screamed run, but my body felt heavy, as though unseen hands were gripping my limbs, keeping me in place. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. I turned sharply away from the window, scanning the darkened street again, my chest tight with the kind of fear that doesn't go away, the kind that burrows deep. When I forced myself to look back at the glass, it was still again. As if nothing had ever happened. I stumbled backward, my legs unsteady. The air around me suddenly felt colder, the streetlights flickered as if reacting to my fear. I forced myself to keep moving, to put distance between me and whatever the hell that had been. But something followed me home that night. Not a person. Not a sound. A feeling. A presence that clung to me. For the rest of the evening, I avoided reflective surfaces. I refused to glance at mirrors or windows. The idea of seeing that wave again, of seeing that smile, made my skin crawl. Sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the reflection's unnatural movements, its expression, the way it watched me. And then the days passed. I tried to push the incident from my mind, convinced myself it had been exhaustion, a hallucination, a stray thought turned into a waking nightmare. Until it started happening again. Not the wave. Not at first. But the feeling. A constant, gnawing sensation that I was being watched, followed, mimicked. That something existed just out of sight, lurking behind every pane of glass, every mirrored surface. I would catch glimpses of my reflection in passing, and every single time, I felt as though it lingered a second too long before moving as it should. Like it was pretending to be normal. A week later, I passed the same boutique, dreading what I might see. The window was the same, silent, ordinary, innocent. I let out a slow breath, willing myself to move on. And then, tap, tap, tap. Soft. Fingertips against glass. I froze. The sound came from behind me. I turned, my blood running cold. Nothing. Just the window. Just the reflection of an empty street. But I knew better. Whatever had waved at me that night, it wasn't done yet. And somehow, some way, I knew. It was waiting. Story 9. It started as an ordinary visit to my favorite coffee shop, a place I had been going to for years, where the scent of roasted beans and cinnamon felt like a second home. But that day, something was different. As I approached the counter, the cashier rang up my usual order, but when I glanced at the receipt, my stomach twisted. There was an extra charge for a drink I had never ordered, something with a name I didn't recognize. Before I could speak, the cashier placed the drink on the counter, their smile strangely vacant. I hesitated. "I think there's been a mistake," I said, pointing at the receipt. The cashier's expression didn't change. "It's a special promotion," they replied casually. I frowned. I had heard nothing about a promotion. There were no signs advertising it, no mention of it in the shop. Something about the situation felt off. But I shrugged it off, convincing myself it was just an innocent mix-up. As I walked out, however, an odd sensation settled over me. The usual warmth of the shop had faded, and the chatter of patrons sounded distant, warped. The moment I stepped outside, a shiver ran down my spine. The streets looked the same, yet they felt different, hollow, stretched. I told myself I was overthinking, that it was nothing. But that didn't stop the unease curling in my gut. That night, as I scrolled through my phone, a notification appeared. A message from an unknown number. I almost dismissed it as spam, but then I saw the words. "Did you like the drink?" My blood ran cold. No one knew about the drink. I hadn't told a soul. My hand hovered over the screen, heart pounding. This had to be a joke. A coincidence. But the precision was too perfect, too deliberate. I typed back, "Who is this?" No response. The unease turned into something deeper, something raw. The feeling of being watched, of being followed, pressed into my chest like a weight. My apartment felt smaller, the shadows in the corners darker. The next morning, I returned to the coffee shop. I had to get answers. When I asked the barista about the drink, she frowned. "We don't have anything like that on the menu. Are you sure you didn't order it from somewhere else?" I gripped the counter. "No. It was here. I always come here." She exchanged a glance with the other barista before offering me a free drink for the mix-up. I accepted, but my mind churned with questions. Had I imagined it? Was it possible I had mistaken the name? The drink had been right there in my hands. The receipt had been real. As I sipped my coffee, a strange sensation prickled at my skin. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I wasn't alone. The shop was busy, yet it felt as if something unseen hovered just behind me, just beyond my periphery. The memory of the message gnawed at me. That night, another text arrived, "I'll be watching you." The words sent ice through my veins. My grip tightened around my phone. Who was this? How did they know? My routine? My habits? Every muscle in my body screamed at me to run, to escape, but from what? From who? The messages kept coming. They knew when I left the house. When I arrived at work. When I stepped outside for fresh air. You can't escape. I know where you are. I stopped going to the coffee shop. I stopped taking the same routes. I avoided crowded places, then deserted ones. But it didn't matter. The messages never stopped. Whoever they weren't just watching me. They were closing in. One night, after yet another text, I snapped. I drove to the police station and told them everything. They listened, nodding in the practiced way that told me they didn't believe a word I was saying. "Probably just a prank," one of them said. "These things happen. Best not to engage." But this wasn't just a prank. It was something more. Something worse. The next morning, I went back to the coffee shop one last time. The air felt heavy, thick with something unseen. I lingered near the counter, studying the barista's movements, the way customers ordered, the way the register displayed each purchase. There was no sign of that mysterious drink, no trace of its existence. But I knew the truth. As I stepped outside, I dared to glance back, half expecting to see someone watching me through the window. But there was no one. And yet, the feeling never left. The messages stopped, but the dread remained, settling in my bones like a sickness. It followed me everywhere. In reflections, in fleeting glances, in the silence between breaths. I was no longer alone. I never would be again. Story 10. The evening was quiet, just the way I liked it. I had just finished dinner and was settling in with a book when my phone buzzed, shattering the peaceful silence. I sighed, setting my book aside and glancing at the screen. My breath hitched. The number staring back at me was familiar. Too familiar. It took a moment for the recognition to settle, but when it did, a cold sensation crawled up my spine. It was my old number. One I hadn't used in years. I hesitated, staring at the screen as the call continued to ring. Something about it felt wrong. off in a way I couldn't quite explain. I discarded that number ages ago when I switched providers. There was no way it should still be active. And yet, there it was. Calling me. I swallowed, my mouth suddenly dry. My rational mind tried to brush it off as a fluke, a glitch, maybe even a spoofed number. But a deeper instinct, one I didn't want to acknowledge, whispered that it was something else. Against my better judgment, I swiped to answer. Hello. I kept my voice steady, casual, though I felt anything but. No response. Instead, there was only silence. No, something else. A faint crackling sound, like static, hissing softly in the background. I frowned. Hello. Nothing. A strange unease slithered into my chest, coiling around my ribs. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. Then, just as abruptly as it had started, the call disconnected. I pulled the phone away from my ear, my pulse hammering. The number was still there, lingering in my call log, but something was wrong. I checked again. There was no record of the call. No voicemail. No indication it had even happened. The unease deepened, seeping into my bones. I told myself it was nothing, just a glitch, an error. But the feeling wouldn't leave. It settled in, heavy and oppressive, like I had just glimpsed something I wasn't meant to see. Sleep didn't come easy that night. By morning, the call was still in my log, staring back at me like a challenge. I couldn't let it go. I needed to know where it had come from. I dug through my closet until I found my old phone, the one that once belonged to that number. Dust clung to it, the screen cracked from neglect. I pressed the power button, half expecting it not to turn on, but after a few flickers, the screen came to life. It felt strange holding it again, like clutching something from another life. I entered the passcode. It came back to me too easily. The home screen blinked into existence, frozen in time. Old messages. Photos. The remnants of a past I had long since left behind. I scrolled through everything, searching for something, anything, that could explain the call. But there was nothing. Just the echoes of old conversations, long-forgotten memories stored in a device I thought I'd never use again. Frustrated, I decided to call my old provider. Maybe they could tell me something. After a long hold, a woman's voice greeted me. Thank you for calling. How can I help you today? I hesitated, feeling ridiculous for even asking. I got a call from my old number last night. One I haven't used in years. I was wondering if there's any record of it being reactivated. She asked for the number. I gave it to her, waiting as she typed. A pause. Then, I'm sorry, sir, but that number has been disconnected for several years. It shouldn't be in use. My stomach twisted. You're sure? I pressed. No chance someone could have gotten it. No, she confirmed. Once a number is deactivated, it's permanently removed from circulation. It's not in use by anyone. I thanked her and hung up, but the call didn't bring any relief. If the number didn't exist anymore, then who, what, had called me? The logical part of my mind fought for control. It had to be a prank, some kind of technical fluke. But the growing knot in my chest told me otherwise. I did the only thing I could think of. I called the number back. The line rang. Once. Twice. Then it clicked. A voice answered. My breath stalled. Hello. It wasn't static this time. It wasn't silence. It was a man's voice. And I knew it. Not just familiar, impossible. My throat tightened. Who is this? Silence. Then, a slow, deliberate response. You shouldn't have called. A chill shot through me, freezing me in place. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, the screen dark, my hands trembling. The number was still there, unmoving, unchanging. For days, I waited for another call. It never came. But I knew it wasn't over. Somewhere in the darkness of my old phone, in the echo of a past I had tried to leave behind, something was still waiting. And the worst part? I had a feeling it was only a matter of time before it called again.